There is a valley where soldiers patrol roads lined with saffron fields, and the flowers bloom the same color as the sunrise they are guarding. In a city built on water, 1,000 wooden homes float on a lake that has never been drained. A mosque stands on 378 wooden pillars, each one a single tree trunk, each one placed 6 centuries ago. A gondola climbs past the last military post into air so thin the silence has texture. This is not the Kashmir of headlines. That Kashmir exists. The ceasefire violations, the barbed wire, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed along a line drawn in 1949. But beneath the wire, older than the line, older than the nations that drew it, there is a valley so beautiful that a dying Mughal emperor used his last words to ask for it. Paradise at the center of the world's most dangerous border. It has a 6-chapter answer. The first thing is the silence. Not empty silence, the kind that has weight, the kind produced by water holding still at 6 in the morning while a city of 1.5 million people has not yet decided to wake. Dal Lake fills 18 square kilometers of the Kashmir Valley floor, and at dawn, before the shikaras begin to move, the surface becomes glass. The Zabarwan Mountains appear twice, once above, once below. The reflection is so precise that the line between mountain and water disappears, and for a moment, the valley exists in a fold, doubled, as though the landscape cannot quite believe itself. Between the boats, the floating gardens, locally called Rad, are patches of vegetation anchored to the lake bed by willow roots, thick enough to support soil, crops, and the weight of a farmer kneeling to harvest tomatoes. Agriculture without land. The technique is at least 500 years old. A houseboat shifts on its mooring. Smoke rises from a tin chimney. A woman in a red shawl steps onto a wooden deck and pours water from a copper vessel into the lake that surrounds her home. 4 generations of her family have lived here without touching land. There are roughly 1,000 houseboats on Dal Lake. The earliest were built in the 1880s when British colonial officers, forbidden by the Maharaja of Kashmir from purchasing land, decided to live on the water instead. The prohibition created an architecture. Cedar-paneled interiors, walnut-carved balconies, verandas facing the Bir Panjal range. The British left. The houseboats remained. The families who maintain them now are not hoteliers. They are residents of a neighborhood that happens to float. In the morning, the market begins. Not on a street, on the water itself. Shikaras converge from every direction, flat-bottomed boats loaded with produce harvested in the dark. Lotus roots in wet bundles, tomatoes in wooden crates. A man balances a basket of green chilies on his knees and paddles with one hand. The trading is done in minutes. No scales, no receipts. By the time the first tourist shikara appears at 8 o'clock, the market has finished. The produce has dispersed, and the water shows no evidence that commerce ever occurred. 300 years of the same transaction. The boats have not changed. The hands pulling lotus roots at 4 in the morning belong to the same families whose hands pulled them a century ago. The lake feeds the Jhelum, 725 kilometers of river that begins in the Bir Panjal range, passes through Srinagar under 7 wooden bridges, and flows west toward the line of control before crossing into Pakistan. One of the few things in Kashmir permitted to cross. In September 2014, the Jhelum rose 6 meters in 3 days. The flood submerged Srinagar to its rooftops. The rescue was performed by the same shikaras that run the floating market, the only vessels shallow enough to navigate flooded streets. The boats that sell tomatoes at dawn saved more than 200,000 people by nightfall. The river does not explain itself. It flows west. Toward the gardens it has fed for 400 years. Toward a border it crosses without papers, without stopping, without knowing that a border is there. The river flows west. The gardens it feeds have been waiting 400 years for someone to explain why they are still here.
The water arrives before you do. A channel runs the full length of the garden, 400 meters of polished stone carrying snowmelt from the Zabarwan foothills in a straight line toward Dal Lake. On either side, chinars. The trees were planted when the garden was built, which means they have stood here for 400 years. Which means their canopy now covers the walkway in a ceiling so dense the light underneath turns amber. Shalimar Bagh, the abode of love. 31 acres arranged across 3 descending terraces, each one lower than the last, each one closer to the lake. Jahangir built it in 1619 as a summer retreat for his wife, Nur Jahan, a woman whose political influence exceeded most of her husband's generals. The garden was his argument that she deserved a setting to match her name, Light of the World. The fountains still run. The water still arrives from the same mountain springs, still falls between the same carved screens, chini khana, latticed alcoves designed to hold oil lamps at night, so the water would appear to flow through fire. The empire is gone. The screens remain. One kilometer south, a second garden descends the same hillside in 12 terraces. Nishat Bagh, the Garden of Joy. Built in 1633 by Asif Khan, Nur Jahan's brother, as a direct response to Shalimar. larger, steeper, with the Zabarwan range rising immediately behind it and Dal Lake spread below like a floor. Each of the 12 terraces was said to represent a sign of the zodiac. The water cascades between them in a staircase of white noise that drowns the traffic on the road outside. Jahangir visited Nishat once and admired it so openly that Asif Khan offered it as a gift. The emperor refused, then visited again, then refused again. The garden stayed in the family. The compliment remained. Every empire that reached this valley built something. The Mughals built gardens. The Afghans built fortifications. The Sikhs built gurdwaras. The Dogras built palaces. The British built houseboats because they were forbidden to build anything else. Kashmir's history is a sequence of conquerors, each one arriving, looking at the valley, and deciding it was worth the effort of possession. Above Nishat, on a ridge overlooking the entire valley, the ruins begin. Pari Mahal, 6 arched terraces of crumbling stone open to the sky, built in the 17th century by Prince Dara Shikoh. The Mughal heir who studied comparative religion translated the Upanishads into Persian and was executed by his own brother for the crime of intellectual curiosity. Before the Mughals, this hilltop held a Buddhist monastery. Before the Buddhists, no one recorded what stood here. The ruins offer something the gardens cannot: the entire valley in a single frame. Dal Lake to the east, the Pir Panjal Range to the west, Srinagar below, its rooftops and minarets compressed by altitude into a pattern that looks, from this height, like a city that planned itself. Dara Shikoh used Pari Mahal as a school. He taught astronomy here. The terraces align with cardinal directions, not by accident, not by faith, but by measurement. The prince who would have been emperor chose this hilltop to study stars. He lost his throne. The hilltop kept his terraces. Jahangir died in 1627. His last recorded words, according to court historians, were not about his empire, his wars, or his succession. They were only Kashmir. The emperors left their gardens. The armies that followed left something else. "378 pillars of deodar cedar, each one a single trunk, hold the roof of the largest mosque in Kashmir. The courtyard is open to the sky, wide enough to hold 30,000 worshippers, narrow enough that the mountains above Srinagar remain visible from every angle. Sultan Sikandar Shah founded it in 1394. It has been destroyed by fire and rebuilt 3 times since, each time in the same style, with the same wood, on the same ground. The mosque is not a relic. On Fridays, it fills. The prayers are not quiet. Kashmiri Islam arrived through Sufi mystics, not conquest, through poetry and music, not armies. And the devotion here carries melody. The relationship between faith and landscape in Kashmir is not metaphorical. The shrines sit on hilltops and lake shores because the mystics who founded them chose beauty as a form of worship. The pillars have stood for 6 centuries. They will need to be replaced eventually. The deodar forests that grew them are thinner now. When the time comes, no one knows where the wood will come from. That question has not yet been answered. The mosque does not rush these things. Outside the mosque, the alleyways begin. The buildings are timber-framed, 3 and 4 stories, with latticed windows that lean over the street at angles suggesting negotiation rather than engineering. The wood is deodar cedar, the same wood the houseboats are made from, the same wood the mosque is made from, the same wood that has held this city together since before the Mughals arrived. The bazaars sell what they have always sold: copper vessels hammered by hand. Srinagar's copperware has been traded along the Silk Road since the 14th century. Dried spices in open sacks, pashmina shawls folded in cedar boxes. A shopkeeper explains the weave count, while outside, a military patrol passes without entering. The patrol is routine. The shopkeeper does not pause. Lal Chowk, the city's central square, takes its name from the Urdu word for red, a nod to the Red Square in Moscow, adopted in the 1940s when the politics of the moment demanded a gesture. The politics of the name have outlived the politics that inspired it. The square is now traffic, vendors, cell phone shops. History in Kashmir accumulates faster than it can be acknowledged. On the western shore of Dal Lake, a white marble dome catches the afternoon light. Hazratbal, the shrine that houses what is believed to be a relic of the Prophet Muhammad, the Mu'i-Muqaddas, a hair from the Prophet's beard, displayed to the public on specific religious occasions. The relic arrived in Kashmir in the 17th century. Its disappearance in 1963 triggered the largest protests in the valley's modern history. The shrine sits on the water's edge. The dome reflects in the lake. The reflection is not ornamental. It is the architecture's intention. The building was designed to exist twice, once in stone, once in water. Like everything in Kashmir, it is doubled. Inside, the prayers are quieter than at Jamia Masjid. The space is smaller, the light softer. A woman kneels on the marble floor and presses her forehead to the ground. Outside, the lake holds the dome's reflection without distortion. The muezzin calls at dawn. The army checkpoint opens an hour later. Srinagar does not notice the sequence. It has always been this. The road from Srinagar climbs for 2 hours through pine forest before the trees end and the meadow begins. Gulmarg, Meadow of Flowers. At 2,650 meters, the ground is a bowl of green, cupped between ridges of the Pir Panjal, wide enough that the far edge dissolves into haze. In summer, the grass is thick with wild iris, buttercup, and blue poppy. In winter, the meadow disappears under 4 meters of powder snow and becomes one of the highest ski resorts in the world. The Mughal emperor Yusuf Shah Chak discovered the meadow in the 16th century and used it as a royal retreat. 400 years later, the Indian Army's high-altitude warfare school trains soldiers on the same slopes. The meadow has always served 2 purposes: beauty and strategy, and has never seen a contradiction between them. The gondola leaves Gulmarg at the tree line and does not stop climbing. Phase 1 reaches Kongdori at 3,080 meters. Phase 2 continues to Afarwat Peak, 3,980 meters, the highest point reachable by cable car in Asia. The air thins. The temperature drops 15 degrees in 20 minutes. Below, the meadow shrinks to a green comma between white ridges. Above, the Himalayan snowpack stretches north without interruption. The ceasefire line is 11 kilometers from the summit. On clear days, the wire is visible, a dark thread across white snow, the only straight line in a landscape that refuses them. The gondola turns and descends. The skiers do not look north. At the valley floor, the color changes. Purple. Hectares of it. The saffron crocus blooms in late October across the Karewa plateaus of Pempore, ancient alluvial terraces 15 kilometers south of Srinagar, their soil uniquely suited to a flower that grows nowhere else in India with this intensity. Each crocus produces 3 stigmas. Each stigma is pulled by hand. It takes 150,000 flowers to yield a single kilogram of dried saffron, the most labor-intensive harvest on the surface of the earth. The price? $3,000 per kilogram. The labor? 20,000 households working on their knees through November, pulling threads thinner than human hair from flowers that bloom for 2 weeks and then are gone. Kashmiri saffron carries a GI tag, geographic indication, the same protection given to champagne and Darjeeling tea. The soil, the altitude, the specific cold of these plateau nights, the combination is unrepeatable. The saffron cannot be moved. Neither, it turns out, can the families who grow it. North of the saffron fields, the valley opens into water again. Wular Lake. 130 square kilometers of fresh water, the largest in India, fed by the Jhelum, surrounded by willow and poplar, its surface broken at dawn by the flat-bottomed boats of fishermen casting nets they made themselves. The lake supplies 60% of Kashmir's freshwater fish. The economy of its shores has been the same for centuries. Catch, dry, sell, repeat. But Wular is shrinking. Encroachment has reduced its area by more than half in 3 decades. Silt from deforestation fills the lakebed. Willow plantations crowd the margins. The water that once reached the road now stops a kilometer short. The fishermen adapt. They have always adapted. The question is whether the lake will return the favor. The saffron blooms for 2 weeks. The lake shrinks another meter. The harvest and the loss happen in the same valley, in the same season, without acknowledging each other. The road east from Srinagar follows the Litter River into a valley that narrows with every kilometer. The pine forest thickens. The mountains on either side steepen until they are vertical, and the river between them is the only flat surface left. Pahalgam sits at the end of this corridor, a town whose name translates as Village of Shepherds. And whose economy has not fully outgrown the translation. The Gujar and Bakarwal, semi-nomadic herders who move their flocks between highland pastures and valley floors with the seasons, still cross through Pahalgam every spring and autumn. Their camps appear on the riverbanks for a week, then vanish. The sheep are counted. The route is unchanged. 300,000 Hindu pilgrims pass through Pahalgam every summer on the way to the Amarnath Cave, a natural ice formation at 3,888 meters that is worshipped as a manifestation of Shiva. The pilgrimage is one of the largest annual religious movements in India. For 2 months, the town's population triples. Then it empties. Pahalgam returns to the river, the shepherds, and the particular quiet of a place that exists between events. 7 kilometers south, the valley opens. Betaab Valley, named after a 1983 Bollywood film shot here. A name so unrelated to the landscape that it has become its own kind of landmark. The valley is enclosed by mountains on 3 sides. A glacial stream cuts through the center, cold enough that standing in it for 30 seconds produces pain. The grass is the green of a place that receives more rain than it needs. There is no settlement here, no permanent structure. The valley is visited and left, admired and departed from, and the absence of habitation is its defining quality. Betaab Valley does not need to be lived in. It needs to be seen, and then it needs to be left alone. Kashmir understands this distinction better than most places. The road continues east and climbs. Sonamarg, Meadow of Gold, named for the wildflowers that turn the alpine grass yellow in June, or for the gold that was once mined in the surrounding hills, depending on which century is telling the story. At 2,730 meters, the valley is broad, flat, and ringed by glaciers. The Tajiwaz Glacier hangs on the southern face, visible from the road. A wall of compressed ice that was 2 kilometers closer 50 years ago and retreats further every summer. Sonamarg is the last major settlement before the Zojila Pass.
3,528 meters of switchbacks and gravel that connect Kashmir to Ladakh and close every November when the snow makes them impassable. For 6 months of the year, this road is the valley's eastern wall. Nothing enters, nothing leaves. The people of Sonamarg accept this the way coastal towns accept tides, not as interruption, but as rhythm. Beyond the pass, the landscape changes entirely. The green ends. The rock turns gray. The Buddhist monasteries of Ladakh replace the mosques of the valley. Kashmir, the Kashmir of water, wood, saffron, and prayer, stops at this ridge. The road turns north. The green ends. Beyond the next ridge, Kashmir becomes something else.
The landscape does not change. That is the first thing. There is no wall, no river, no geological feature that explains why the line is here and not 3 kilometers north. The mountains continue. The pine forests continue. The sky remains the same sky on both sides. The line of control is a human decision, imposed on a landscape that offered no assistance in drawing it. 740 kilometers. From the glaciers of Siachen in the north to the plains of Punjab in the south. The LOC traces a path agreed upon by exhausted diplomats in July 1949, after the first war between India and Pakistan ended without resolution. The line was not called a border. It was called a ceasefire line, a pause, not a conclusion. 77 years later, the pause holds. By most estimates, 700,000 Indian soldiers maintain it. The villages nearest the LOC live inside a fact that most of the world treats as an abstraction. The bunkers are concrete. The shelling is seasonal. Children attend school in buildings with reinforced roofs. This is what the world's most dangerous border looks like from the inside. Not soldiers in formation, but a woman hanging laundry between her house and a bunker, both structures so close that the sheets touch concrete when the wind blows. Kashmir became a conflict because it was paradise. 2 nations wanted it for the same reason Jahangir wanted it, because looking at it made possession feel necessary. The mountains did not cause the dispute. Their beauty did. South of the LOC, the road enters a valley where the rock turns gray and the vegetation disappears. Kargil. In the summer of 1999, Indian and Pakistani soldiers fought on the peaks above this town for more than 2 months. The Kargil War, the last major military engagement between 2 nuclear-armed nations. The peaks reach 5,000 meters. The fighting occurred above the snow line, in conditions that killed as efficiently as the weapons. The war memorial sits at the edge of the highway, a low stone wall listing names, ranks, ages. The youngest was 19. The memorial does not argue. It does not contextualize. It lists what the line required, and the list is long enough to fill the wall. And the wall is long enough to take a full minute to walk past. A bus passes without slowing. The mountains behind the memorial are the same mountains the men on the wall died defending. The peaks have not changed. "11 kilometers south, the valley reaches its final fact. Dras. Elevation 3,300 meters. Recorded low, minus 60 degrees Celsius. The second coldest inhabited place on Earth, after Oymyakon in Siberia, ahead of everywhere else. In winter, the valley disappears under snow so deep that only rooftops remain. The road closes. The residents wait for a thaw that arrives in May, if it arrives at all. The people of Dras do not leave. The cold is not an obstacle. It is the address. They live here the way the Afar live in the Danakil, not despite the conditions, but inside them, in a relationship the outside world finds easier to admire than to understand. The road ends. The snow begins. The border is somewhere above the cloud line, invisible, absolute, and the valley beneath it holds its people the way it has always held them, without explanation, without apology, without end. The drone climbs until Sonamarg becomes texture, meadow, glacier, the thread of a road disappearing into the pass, and keeps climbing until Kashmir looks the way it looked at the beginning. Valley floor at first light, mountains holding the last of the dark, 1,000 houseboats on a lake that has not moved. We began with saffron fields and soldiers. We end with them. The flowers are still blooming. The soldiers are still there. The line drawn in 1949 has not shifted. The lake has not drained. The mosque stands on the same 378 pillars. The gondola still climbs past the last military post. The floating market still opens before dawn to sell tomatoes on water. Kashmir is not a conflict with scenery. It is a landscape with a conflict inside it. The paradise was here before the border. It will be here after. The oldest garden, still growing.